Romeo and Juliet isn't a love story. We all know this by now. But I don't think Romeo actually even understands love at all. I know this sounds ridiculous because Romeo and Juliet is literally the blueprint love story. Like we all say, oh, I want you to be my Romeo and stuff like that. Like Romeo is kind of comes synonymous with love. He doesn't understand it. Yeah, we're gonna talk about that. The older I get, especially because I studied Romeo and Juliet back in year 9 and I barely paid attention, but the movie, I love it, and the more I watch it nowadays, I realise that he's not in love with Juliet at all. He wasn't even in love with Rosaline, I don't think. He was addicted to the idea of being in love, and he confuses obsession with love quite a lot. And I think Shakespeare might have actually intended that. This was Shakespeare's plan all along. Because when you actually look at Romeo throughout the play, he's impulsive, he's obsessive, dramatic, emotionally extreme, and constantly chasing intensity over stability. And the reason I think that interpretation is so interesting is because it completely changes how we see the tragedy. Because if Romeo isn't truly in love, then Romeo and Juliet becomes less beautiful romance destroyed by fate and more two emotionally overwhelmed teenagers trapped in a violent society, which is exactly what happened. Romeo before Juliet, he was already obsessed with someone else, Rosaline. And that's important because he acts like Rosaline is the love of his life. He says, she hath forsworn to love. He's wandering round depressed, he's isolating himself. He's crying, writing poetry, acting completely heartbroken. In the movie, he's not talking to his family, he's off at the beach, just sitting there, being all moody, and his mum's like really worried about him and stuff like that. Like, he's bad. And Benvolio literally describes him disappearing before dawn and shutting himself away in dark rooms, like some kind of Victorian situationship victim. Like, Rosaline can't have been all that. Like, she can't have been such a baddie, like, that he was this down bad for her. Like, I think he's getting a bit obsessed. Like, the second Romeo sees Juliet, so imagine all of this before, he's so obsessed with her. The minute he sees Juliet, he goes, bye Rosaline, no one needs you anymore. And that is not emotionally stable behaviour, yeah? So if your man did that to you, you would think there's something seriously wrong with him, right? And again, Shakespeare does this deliberately. Romeo's language around Rosaline is so exaggerated. It's performative and full of cliche oxymorons like, oh brawling love, oh loving hate, and like stuff like that. It's just, calm down. He sounds like someone performing heartbreak rather than actually experiencing it. And it's like he's in the idea, or he's in love with the idea of being tragic and emotional, which is kind of ugh. And then the second he sees Juliet, he goes, did my heart love till now? Which is objectively insane, by the way, guys. What? After all of that around Rosaline, then the second you switch up and you go, I don't think I was ever in love before now. Imagine you were Rosaline, how are you going to feel in that situation? Do you know what I mean? What? And Romeo 5 minutes ago was acting like Rosaline was the greatest love story ever told. Because he was. And this is why I think he is addicted to emotional intensity over the actual, I don't think he's ever been in love. Love is complicated, but it's not that. I'll tell you now. He needs overwhelming feelings, which is quite common. Like, sometimes people think they're in love because they're so overwhelmed, but then they realise, nah, I didn't actually love that guy. He doesn't know how to exist calmly. Romeo confuses intensity with love. This is section 2. One of the most modern interpretations of Romeo, in my opinion, is that he mistakes obsession for love. Because what actually defines his relationship with Juliet? It's speed, it's intensity, risk, secrecy, drama. They meet, they kiss, they marry. Multiple people die and then they kill themselves in about 4 days. What? That is not a stable relationship. No one can tell me that that is a stable relationship. That is emotional chaos. And Shakespeare constantly links Romeo to impulsive behaviour. Even Friar Lawrence warns him. He goes, these violent delights have violent ends. Which, honestly, it's a warning, but he should have been more clear about it, honestly. So it's kind of his fault, a little bit. Which is Shakespeare basically saying, if you burn brightly this quickly, it will destroy you. Which, facts. If you rush into a relationship, even nowadays, right? If you rush into some kind of relationship, you try... I've done this, yeah? I moved in with my boyfriend the day I met him. Well, not the day I met him, like... We met, but then I moved in with him pretty much straight away. And it's going great for us so far. Don't rush into things. What's interesting is that Juliet actually becomes more rational throughout the play. People always portray Juliet as the naive, emotional one, but she repeatedly pauses and thinks things through, whereas Romeo, he will just rush straight in, and she goes, it's too rash, too unadvised, too sudden, like she's thinking about it. And I think modern audiences would recognise this personality type immediately. People who become completely consumed by relationships, and people who fall in love with the idea of romance, people who mistake emotional intensity for genuine compatibility, and that's why Romeo still feels realistic 400 years later. It's still relevant today because people are still acting like that. The role of masculinity, what is that actually doing in this section? This is where the play becomes really interesting psychologically. Because Romeo lives in an extremely masculine, violent society where men are expected to fight, perform, react emotionally through violence, and prove themselves constantly. Look at Tybalt. Look at Mercutio. Mercutio is especially fascinating because he mocks vulnerability constantly. Mercutio is my favourite character in the movie because I just think he's iconic. But he's also my least favourite character in the play because I think he's awful. He turns everything into a joke. He makes sexual jokes non-stop. He escalates conflict, and he treats emotional sincerity as weakness. He makes fun of Romeo constantly for how he feels, which I think is very toxic masculinity kind of thing, which I think is bad. So Romeo, he exists between two extremes. Violent masculinity and obsessive romance. Is that fair? Not really. And he swings wildly between them. He is not really ever in the middle. He's like one extreme to another, do you know what I mean? One minute he's climbing into Juliet's garden, speaking in poetic metaphors. First of all, that's trespassing, by the way. What? And the next minute he's stabbing Tybalt to death. I'm not gonna lie, if I was trying to woo someone, like if I fell in love with some girl and I was like, oh, do you know what, I'm gonna do something to impress her, my first thought is not going to be, let me stab her cousin. Because that's what Tybalt is to Juliet. He's her cousin. Or something. He's related to her, I know that. Why would he think that's a good idea? But anyway, he does it. And emotional instability is one of Romeo's defining traits. After Mercutio dies, rest in peace, Romeo says, oh, I am fortune's fool. I don't think fate is entirely responsible there. Romeo repeatedly makes impulsive emotional decisions and then blames destiny afterwards. I think that's the ultimate cop-out. You're gonna say, something bad happened and now I'm gonna blame destiny. I'm sorry, I could rob a bank tomorrow and go, oh, don't worry, it was my fate to do that, it was destiny. Destiny's fault. Like, oh, that's not a real thing, why are you doing that? Is there any actual love there? I'm not saying Romeo felt nothing for Juliet. I think he genuinely believed that he loved her, but there's a difference between feeling something intensely and understanding it maturely. Romeo barely knows Juliet. And what he loves is how she makes him feel, how dramatic the relationship is, how dangerous it is, how emotionally consuming it becomes. And Shakespeare actually contrasts Romeo's impulsiveness with characters who think more practically. Even Juliet becomes strategic. She starts off so naive and such a little girl, and then at the end she begins planning, questioning, analysing consequences, and Romeo rarely does. And the best example is the ending. Romeo hears that Juliet is dead and immediately decides to kill himself. There's no investigation, no pause, no patience, no nothing. It's just an immediate emotional reaction. I'm not gonna lie, if my boyfriend, if I found out he was dead, my first reaction isn't, oh, let me kill myself straight away. Because even though I love him, I don't love him that much. Do you know what I mean? That I think I'll keep on living, thank you. The impulsiveness, that is what kills them both, because then he finds out she's dead, kills himself. She comes back to life because she wasn't really ever dead, and then she goes, oh no, and kills herself. They're both just as impulsive as each other, but Juliet, towards the end, kind of does start analysing these a little bit more. She just doesn't think, bless her, because she's just not the brightest spark, I don't think. Why does this actually matter for GCSE? Now, if you were using this interpretation in an essay, it's actually really useful because it gives you a more sophisticated argument than just Romeo loved Juliet. You can argue that Shakespeare presents Romeo as emotionally impulsive, obsessed with romantic idealism, and incapable of moderation. Those are 3 separate arguments that you can use based on this. You can analyse these violent delights have violent ends as foreshadowing for his emotional extremity. You can compare his shallow love for Rosaline and his obsessive love for Juliet. That's another good comparison that you can make. You can discuss how masculinity influences behaviour in Verona, particularly emotional behaviour, and you can even challenge the idea that fate alone causes the tragedy. Now, I've done a video about this. I don't know what upload schedule is going to happen, so I don't know whether that'll be out before or after this one, but keep an eye out. Because honestly, human behaviour causes most of the tragedy in the play. And I think that is why Romeo and Juliet still survives today. I think that's why it's still so relevant, because it understands something so terrifyingly human, which is how dangerous intense emotion can become when people are young, impulsive, isolated, and surrounded by violence. Romeo doesn't just fall in love, he consumes love completely, and eventually it consumes him back. And I think that's way more interesting than star-crossed lovers, because that is just the surface level thing that Shakespeare was trying to present. The actual thing of it was tragedy and how human behaviour causes all these different things, and I think it was a criticism of how people behaved at the time. And yeah. If you want to explore some more hidden themes in GCSE English literature, then click this video and subscribe for more. Love you guys, bye. Mwah.